The fluorescent lights in the conference room flickered erratically, as if they, too, were having a nervous breakdown, a fitting reflection of the chaos unfolding below them. Each dim pulse felt like a stuttering heartbeat of a system in crisis, mirroring the tension boiling over among the people gathered in the sleek corporate space. Bryce Hamilton, senior manager with a razor-sharp gaze and a silk tie he had adjusted 3 times in 10 minutes, was nearly seething with fury. His face flushed crimson, tightened with frustration and mounting pressure. On the massive screen before him, a barrage of error messages flashed like a digital indictment. He slammed his palm onto the mahogany table, making the coffee cups tremble. "This is unacceptable," he growled, each word heavy with frustration. "We're losing $12,000 every hour. No one in the room met his eyes. The veteran engineers, once proud of their reputation as the best team in the business, now looked like deer caught in headlights. Sarah from IT fiddled with her pen, the repetitive clicking a subconscious attempt to soothe her nerves. Marcus, a seasoned developer, stared blankly at his screen, hammering the F5 key like it was a magic button. Even Tom, usually armed with snide remarks for every situation, sat silent, lips pressed tight. In a quiet corner of the room, nearly invisible in his dull suit and worn khaki jacket, sat Gary Mitchell. He held a weathered notebook and occasionally jotted down notes. To everyone else, he was just another consultant, one of those contract workers who come and go like the seasons. Officially, he was there to assess workflow efficiency, but in truth, he was watching, studying how people treated each other, especially when they believed no one important was paying attention. What Gary had observed over the past 3 weeks had less to do with system failures and more to do with the cracks in human behavior under pressure. Bryce continued pacing like a caged animal, breathing hard through clenched teeth. "The client presentation is tomorrow morning, and our entire operational system is being held together by digital duct tape and a few desperate prayers." Sarah gathered her courage and spoke up. "Sir, we've tried everything. The issue seems to be deep in the legacy code, but—" "Don't talk to me about needles and haystacks," Bryce snapped, his eyes flaring. "I want solutions. We're the leading tech firm in the state and we can't even keep our own system online." Just then, the conference room door creaked open. Every head turned. Standing there was a young woman, brown hair tied back in a simple ponytail, a faded denim jacket over a plain white t-shirt, and a worn backpack slung over one shoulder. She looked like your average college student, but in her dark eyes was a quiet intelligence, the kind that absorbed everything and only spoke when it truly mattered. I'm sorry," she said softly, starting to back out. "I was just looking for my dad to let him know I finished my homework early." Bryce's expression shifted, from fury to something closer to disdain. "Your dad?" He narrowed his eyes, then recognition dawned. "Ah, Rodriguez's kid, the janitor's daughter." He said it like the words left a bitter taste in his mouth. A few people shifted awkwardly in their seats. Gary stopped writing and looked up, his interest piqued for the first time. "Yes, sir," Lena replied politely. "I didn't mean to interrupt. I'll just—" "Wait." A strange smile spread across Bryce's face, half amusement, half malice, the kind of smile that appears when a man needs to feel powerful by making someone else feel small. An idea had struck him, born from bruised ego and the desperate need to feel in control of something, anything. "Maybe," he said, eyes locked on the girl. "We're overthinking this." The room fell silent again. Even the air conditioner seemed to quiet down. "Here we are," Bryce said, voice heavy with sarcasm. "A room full of college-educated professionals with degrees and accolades, and we can't solve a simple system error." Gary tightened his grip on his pen. He had seen this before, the moment when someone's true character breaks through the facade, not with shouting but with quiet cruelty. Marcus gave Bryce a wary look. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Bryce swept his arm in an exaggerated gesture toward Lena. Why don't we let our young guest take a crack at it? Kids these days are all great with computers, right? A few uneasy chuckles rippled through the room. Sarah looked down, cheeks flushed. Tom stared intently at his shoes. What do you say, kid? Bryce continued, clearly enjoying himself. Think you can fix what all the experts in this room could? His voice dripped with condescension, like he was bottling it and pouring it over her soul. Lena flushed, but unlike many adults who would have fled in shame, she didn't retreat. I don't think I can, she said quietly. Oh, but I insist. Bryce clapped his hands together like he'd just solved global warming. In fact, I dare you. Fix our little system glitch, and I'll personally make sure you get full credit. Maybe even a letter of recommendation to the local community college. A few awkward laughs echoed. They were strained, uneasy, and laced with a strange guilt. Gary looked around the room. Seasoned professionals, laughing at a teenager for no reason other than her last name. But when his gaze landed on Lena, what he saw made him pause. Most people would have walked away. Most would have apologized and left. But Lena didn't do any of that. She took a small, deliberate step forward. What kind of error is it? She asked softly. The room went still. I'm sorry, what? Bryce blinked. The system error. What kind is it? Database corruption? Memory leaks? External API failures? Each term landed like a dart on a paper-thin authority Bryce had just wrapped himself in. Gary leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowed. It's a cascading failure in the production environment, Bryce stammered, realizing he was cornered. Several subsystems are affected. It's complex. When did it start? Lena asked calmly. About 3 weeks ago, Sarah answered reflexively, then caught herself, surprised to have spoken. Did you check if it lines up with any scheduled maintenance or external API calls? Lena continued, as if she had seamlessly transitioned from being an observer to taking the lead in the meeting. The room fell utterly silent. Gary set his pen down completely. Excuse me, what did you say? Bryce asked, his usual sarcasm gone, replaced by confusion. If the issue is intermittent but getting progressively worse, it could be a resource leak accumulating over time, or it might be due to a change on the vendor's side. Has anyone looked at the system logs from when this first started? Marcus and Sarah exchanged glances. Even Tom looked up for the first time. How do you even know this stuff? Sarah started to ask but stopped herself mid-sentence. Bryce's face flushed, not with anger this time, but with the realization that he was no longer in control. This was supposed to end with laughter. Instead, Lena, the girl he meant to turn into a punchline, was making him look like a fool. All right, Bryce said loudly, trying to seize control again. I think we've had enough fun. Go find your dad, kid. Let the grown-ups handle this. But Lena didn't move. On her face, beneath the remnants of embarrassment, was something else, a flicker of light, something close to resolve. You dared me, she said, her voice low. Even if you were joking, you said it in front of everyone. She turned, looking each person in the room in the eye. When her gaze met Gary's, he saw something that made his heartbeat slow. Courage. Not the loud, defiant kind, but the quiet kind. The kind that stands tall, even when it knows it's small. I accept. Bryce opened his mouth, then closed it again, like a fish out of water. I accept your challenge, Mr. Hamilton. I'd like to try and fix your system. The room was dead silent. Barry could hear his own heartbeat. In 23 years of corporate life, through thousands of meetings and countless political power plays, he had never seen anything quite like this. A 19-year-old girl, the janitor's daughter, had just called out a senior executive in front of his entire management team. Fine, Bryce said through clenched teeth, face pale. "Go ahead. But when you fail, and you will, I don't want to hear any excuses about it being too hard or too complicated." "Deal," Lena replied instantly, without hesitation. As she turned to leave, Gary bent down and wrote a single line in his notebook. "Follow up on L. Rodriguez." And for the first time since his arrival, he felt something shift. From this moment on, the game would no longer be the same. 3 hours later, the office had gone quiet. Only the cleaning staff remained, along with a few night owls grinding through overtime. Lena sat cross-legged on the floor outside Conference Room B, her laptop balanced on her knees and connected to the guest Wi-Fi. The hallway was hushed, save for the distant hum of vacuum cleaners and the soft clicking of her keyboard. She had been staring at the same screen for over 20 minutes, but her mind had drifted to a conversation from 2 years ago, sitting next to her father late at night. "Programming isn't just about writing code," Arthur had told her, his wrinkled yet deft hands gliding across the keyboard. "It's about understanding how the world works, both people and machines." "Systems have their own way of thinking, Lena," Arthur had said, eyes gazing far away. "And sometimes the most elegant solution is the one no one expects." Lena remembered that night vividly, the moment her worldview shifted. She was 17 then, struggling with high school algebra, and convinced that anything computer was far beyond her reach. Arthur Donovan, the graying man who often showed up at the office right when the night shift started, was one of the few people who always carried thick technical books like bricks under his arm. The first time she mustered the courage to ask about them, Arthur had looked at her with gentle surprise. "You want to learn?" he asked, his worn face lighting up with a quiet smile. "Kids your age usually think programming is boring." "I don't know if I want to learn," she admitted. I see the way you look when you work, like you're solving a puzzle, and I like puzzles." That had been the beginning of everything. What Lena didn't know, what Arthur never told her, was that the puzzles she worked on with him late at night, under the dim yellow light, were actually fragments of the very architectural frameworks that powered the company whose hallway she now sat in. The same system Bryce Hamilton was running but never truly understood. Arthur Donovan had been Pinnacle Tech's lead systems architect for 15 years. He designed the core infrastructure that still ran nearly all of their operations, but after a minor heart attack and an early retirement, he faded into obscurity. Like yesterday's news. No one remembered the quiet man who built their digital backbone. Except for her father, Miguel, who had become an unlikely friend to Arthur during their overlapping night shifts. Arthur had once told her, "Legacy systems are like old houses. People keep adding rooms, repainting walls, but no one wants to look at the original blueprint. That's where the real problems hide." Lena opened the system logs that Sarah had reluctantly granted her access to. At first glance, the error patterns seemed random, but they weren't. There was a rhythm to them, like a heartbeat, but one with irregular skips. She picked up her phone and scrolled to a contact saved under the simple name, Arthur. "I know it's late, but I could use some guidance. Remember what you told me about cascading failures?" The reply came back in less than 2 minutes. "Dated still, up working on my model trains. What kind of cascade are we talking about?" Over the next hour, Lena described what she was seeing in the logs. Arthur never gave her direct answers. That wasn't his way. Instead, he asked the kind of questions that nudged her mind in the right direction, sharpening her instincts. "When you see intermittent errors that get worse over time, what's the first thing you check?" "Resource leaks." "Good. And if it's not memory or CPU?" "Network connections, database queries, file handlers." "Excellent. So what if the leak isn't coming from your code?" That question stopped Lena cold. She had always assumed the problem was internal, but what if it wasn't? "Arthur, what if someone added something to our system that wasn't supposed to be there?" Her phone buzzed. This time, it was a call. Arthur's voice was low and sharp. "Lena, what exactly are you looking at?" She described the log entries in detail, abnormal processes routing through unfamiliar IP addresses that didn't match the company's network topology, database queries happening during off months, and bandwidth spikes that coincided with system slowdowns. "Acha," he breathed, his voice a mix of concern and warning. "You need to be extremely careful. What you're describing sounds like someone might be siphoning data from your system, or worse." Arthur paused for a moment, then enunciated each word clearly. "They might be using your company's infrastructure to run something else. A hidden operation, a form of piggyback processing so sophisticated even criminals would be impressed." Lena felt her heartbeat quicken. She swallowed hard. This wasn't just a software glitch anymore. This was intentional. "Arthur, the manager who dared me, he keeps saying he's got vendors working on it. But what if he knows exactly what's going on and doesn't want it fixed? And he's buying time by covering it up," Arthur finished firmly. "Lena, listen to me very carefully. Document everything you find, but don't fix it, and don't tell anyone, at least not yet." But I accepted the dare. Everyone's expecting me to follow through. "No, Lena," he said, softening his tone. "Everyone's expecting you to fail, and that gives you something no one else has, the element of surprise. Use it wisely." After the call ended, Lena sat still in the dim hallway, her eyes locked on her screen. Arthur had always taught her that the most important skill in programming wasn't writing code, it was pattern recognition. And the pattern she was seeing now had nothing to do with machines. It was about greed. Over the next 2 hours, Lena meticulously documented everything, from abnormal network traffic and suspicious database activity to the recurrent foreign IP addresses found in the system logs. It all pointed to one conclusion. Someone was exploiting Pinnacle Tech's infrastructure for personal gain, and the technical errors were just a smokescreen. By the time the clock struck 3 a.m. and her father arrived for his cleaning shift, Lena had everything she needed. She hadn't just fixed the system. She had uncovered the fracture at its foundation, where truth, deception, and ambition were woven together beneath the guise of routine operations. "Mija, what are you still doing here?" Miguel asked as he pushed his cleaning cart down the now empty hallway. "Just working on a little project, Papa." Lena smiled and gently closed her laptop. "I think I've figured out the solution." What she didn't say was that the solution would change everything. For her future, for the company's fate, and especially for the man who thought she was nothing more than a punchline. The next morning, Lena stepped into the company's lobby bathed in the cold light of dawn. The air felt charged, like a storm gathering just beyond the clouds. In her jacket pocket, a small USB drive carried more than just code. It held her hopes, her doubts, and a truth no one was prepared to confront. She had barely slept. Her mind had spent the night running through every detail, double-checking every log, every line of code, every note. At the IT support desk, Kevin, the young programmer who rarely acknowledged her, looked up in surprise. "Hey, you're the girl from yesterday, right? The one Bryce was..." He trailed off, clearly regretting the rest of that sentence. Yeah," Lena said simply, setting a printed report and the USB on the desk. "I found the cause of the system errors, and the fix." "You're serious?" Kevin raised an eyebrow as he took the papers. "Everything's documented," she nodded. "The patch is pretty simple, once you understand what's really going on. But Kevin," she leaned in slightly, lowering her voice, "you might want to escalate this. This isn't just a bug." Without another word, she turned and walked away. She had classes to attend, and she'd done what she promised. The rest was out of her hands. What Lena didn't see was Kevin's eyes widening as he read her report. What she didn't see was him immediately calling his supervisor. What she didn't see was Gary Mitchell, the forgettable consultant, arriving at the IT department just 15 minutes later. And he wasn't there as an outsider anymore. 3 hours later, as Lena passed by the main server room during her lunch break, a voice shouted in disbelief behind the glass. "This is insane. The entire production environment just stabilized. Check out these performance metrics. Someone just cleaned house. All the memory leaks, gone. The database queries, optimized. Even the network latency is fixed. Who submitted this patch?" That's the weird part. It came through standard channels, but the code? It's brilliant. Whoever did this didn't just patch the surface. They eliminated the root cause. A small smile tugged at Lena's lips. Arthur would be proud. But the smile faded quickly as she heard the heavy footsteps behind her. Well, a familiar mocking voice said, "Bryce Hamilton." She turned around and immediately sensed the danger in the air. Bryce's face had gone pale, his eyes taut with barely contained rage. "Mr. Hamilton," she said politely, "I heard the system's running smoothly today." "Oh, it's running so smoothly," he said, stepping closer, each footfall heavy with power and menace, "that it's raised some very interesting questions." 2 men stood behind Bryce, Richards from procurement and Stevens from operations, and both looked like they'd rather disappear into the walls. "Questions?" Lena asked, her voice quiet but steady. "About vendors, about service contracts, about who's really manipulating this system, and why," Bryce said, his tone cold as steel. Leia felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She hadn't imagined the patch would attract attention at this level, and certainly not that Bryce would be staring at her as if she were a threat. A real one. "I just fixed the issue," she replied, her voice unnervingly calm. "The one you dared me to. But you did more than that, didn't you?" He stepped closer, his words nearly a whisper. "You went poking around where you didn't belong, and you uncovered things that were never meant to come to light." The air around them seemed to constrict. "I documented everything in my report," Lena said, forcing her voice to stay level. "The unusual network traffic, the external IP addresses, the resource drain masked as system errors." "Shut your mouth," Bryce snapped, eyes burning red. "You have no idea what you've just done." "Actually," a calm voice cut in from behind them, "I think she knows exactly what she's done." Everyone turned. Gary Mitchell was walking toward them, but this time there was no trace of the forgettable consultant in his posture or expression. He moved with authority, his stance was firm, his eyes sharp, and he radiated something that couldn't be ignored anymore. Command. "Gary?" Bryce looked rattled, unsure for the first time. "This doesn't concern you." "On the contrary," Gary said, stopping beside Lena, "this concerns me directly." He turned to Lena with a look of sincerity. "Ms. Rodriguez, I believe it's time for a proper introduction. My name isn't Gary Mitchell, it's Gary Langford. I'm the CEO of Pinnacle Tech." The hallway fell utterly silent. "And thanks to your excellent work," he continued, "we now have evidence that Mr. Hamilton has been using the company's infrastructure for personal gain through a shell company of his own creation. Essentially, he's been stealing corporate resources to run a private side business." Bryce stood frozen, like a man watching his entire world collapse in real time. "So now," Gary said, his tone cool and deliberate, "the question is, how are we going to deal with this?" 30 minutes later, a hastily convened emergency meeting filled the executive boardroom. Word had spread like wildfire. Wide eyes, half-whispered rumors, that thick, electric buzz in the air that only comes when people realize their world is about to be upended. Nothing would be the same after this. Lena sat at the long, imposing table that looked like it belonged in a government war room. To her left sat Gary Langford, or rather, CO Gary Langford, reviewing a thick stack of documents. To her right was Bryce Hamilton, no longer the dominant figure he had once been. His power had evaporated. Now he looked like a man awaiting a sentence he already knew was coming. The room quickly filled with senior department heads, HR reps, and legal counsel, and all eyes kept returning to the two unlikely figures at the center of it all. A 19-year-old girl and a CEO most of them had never even seen in person. Gary closed the folder in front of him. The soft thud felt like the final nail, in an era long overdue for reckoning. "Before we begin," he said, voice calm but commanding, "I want to make sure everyone in this room fully understands what's happening. For the past month, I've been conducting a covert evaluation of this company's operations and culture." The room stirred. Sarah from IT turned pale, probably replaying every casual complaint she'd ever made in front of the consultant. "I've been observing how employees interact, how decisions are made at every level, how this company treats its people from senior staff to night shift janitors." He opened a weathered notebook, its pages brimming with tight, deliberate handwriting. "And what I've found is deeply concerning." Gary flipped through several pages, each entry razor-sharp, like observations carved with a scalpel. March 15. Witness Manager Hamilton berating a junior staff member simply for asking a clarifying question. March 18. Noted the systemic disregard for cleaning staff. Not a single greeting or acknowledgement, not even basic decency. March 22. Documented multiple disparaging remarks about employees, their families, and the quality of their education. Bryce shifted uncomfortably, his posture unraveling. Around the table, several other managers squirmed in their seats. But the most alarming incident, Gary continued, still composed, happened just yesterday. During a critical crisis meeting, rather than leading his team, Mr. Hamilton chose to mock and humiliate a young woman for the crime of walking into the wrong room at the wrong time. Lena felt her face flush. She could feel dozens of eyes turning toward her. "What Mr. Hamilton didn't know," Gary said as he reached for another folder, "was that I had already begun an investigation into irregularities in our IT infrastructure. Systems don't lie. Logs tell stories, and the story here is crystal clear." He spread out several printed reports across the table. 3 weeks ago, I detected unusual patterns in our server performance. Processing power was being diverted. Bandwidth was being consumed by operations that didn't match any official project. Database queries were running during off-mount with no documentation, no traceable purpose. His tone never wavered, but it was laced with quiet steel. "So I brought in an external cybersecurity firm to conduct a full audit." He slid the final document to the center of the table. "Quantum Solutions, LLC, a consulting company that's been billing us for system optimization services for the past 6 months. And those services have been extremely expensive." Bryce now looked ghostly, his skin drained of all color. "The problem is," Gary said, pausing deliberately, "Quantum Solutions doesn't exist. No office, no staff, no website. It's nothing more than a shell company, designed to siphon funds from our accounts, while secretly piggybacking on our servers to run unauthorized operations." Gary reopened his notebook. March 28. Observed Mr. Hamilton's unusually defensive behavior when questioned about system errors. Noted his oddly detailed knowledge of vendor relationships. Highly suspicious. He looked up from the page, locking eyes with Lena. But everything truly changed the moment Ms. Rodriguez submitted her analysis this morning, Gary said, his eyes bright with conviction. She didn't just fix the problem, she mapped out exactly how our system was being exploited. He gestured toward key points on the printed reports in front of him. She identified the exact IP addresses used to redirect unauthorized traffic. She pinpointed the database tables that were being accessed without permission, and she confirmed which processing cycles were being hijacked to power external operations. Then Gary turned to Bryce. "So, Mr. Hamilton, would you care to explain how a 19-year-old young woman managed to uncover an entire scheme you've been hiding for the past 6 months?" The room fell silent, sharp and unforgiving. Bryce opened his mouth, then closed it again. No words came out. "Or," Gary continued, his tone sharpening, "would you rather explain why the registered owner of Quantum Solutions LLC shares your home address, your social security number, and your bank account information?" It landed like a gunshot. And in that moment, Bryce Hamilton broke. "You don't understand," he stammered. "The budget cuts, the pressure to deliver profits. I was just trying to create extra revenue for the company, all of it. All the money was going to be reinvested into your personal accounts," Gary cut in smoothly. "We've got the full financial trail, Bryce. Every transaction." A ripple of shocked murmurs spread across the boardroom. The company's legal counsel began taking rapid notes. HR exchanged tense glances. "But the most extraordinary part of all this," Gary said, his voice shifting to something more reflective, "is that it was all uncovered by someone who doesn't even work here." His tone softened, thick with emotion. "Someone who was mocked and humiliated just yesterday for caring enough to ask questions. Someone who used her own time, her own tools, and her own intellect to do what our entire highly paid engineering team failed to do." He looked around the room, locking eyes with department heads and executives alike. "This should make us all ask ourselves, how do we define talent? How do we treat people? And what kind of company do we want to be?" Gary closed his notebook with finality, a sound that felt like the end of an era. "Mr. Hamilton, as of this moment you are officially terminated. Security will escort you from the premises. Legal will be in touch regarding the criminal charges." 2 security officers entered and approached Bryce. He looked pale, dazed, a man whose career and reputation had just unraveled in a single morning. As he was led out, Gary turned back to Lena. "And now, Miss Rodriguez, we need to talk." The company-wide announcement came at 2:00 p.m., delivered by Gary himself in the main auditorium. Lena sat in the back row, still processing everything that had unfolded in just a few short hours. Around her, nearly 300 employees murmured among themselves, their voices tinged with nervous energy and disbelief. "By now, many of you have heard rumors," Gary began, his voice carrying firmly across the room. "I'm here to provide the facts." He gave a concise yet thorough overview of the investigation, the fraud that had been uncovered, and the immediate dismissal of Bryce Hamilton, along with 2 procurement managers who had been complicit. Gary didn't mention Lena by name, but as he spoke of an external perspective that helped unravel the entire scheme, dozens of eyes subtly shifted toward her. "The financial impact is serious," he continued. "We estimate over $400,000, 0 cents in company resources were misappropriated. We are pursuing full legal action and expect to recover most of what was lost." A hand went up in the engineering section. "Sir, how can we be sure nothing like this is happening elsewhere?" "Excellent question," Gary nodded. "That's exactly why this review was necessary. Starting today, we're implementing sweeping changes, tighter oversight, regular security audits, and most importantly, a complete overhaul of our hiring, promotion, and talent development practices." After the meeting, Lena quietly stood to leave, but Gary's voice called out to her as she reached the exit. "Ms. Rodriguez, would you join me in my office?" 20 minutes later, Lena found herself sitting in the CEO's suite. somewhere she never imagined she'd be invited. Gary was reviewing her academic file on his screen. Part-time community college student, 3.8 GPA in computer science fundamentals, working 2 jobs to pay tuition, living at home to save money. He looked up. Tell me, what's your plan? I want to finish my associate degree first, Lena replied honestly. Then, if I can afford it, transfer to a university, computer science or software engineering. And what inspired you? Gary asked. Lena hesitated, then chose to speak the truth. As someone, not a school teacher, but he taught me that programming isn't just about writing code. It's about solving problems, about learning how to see things others miss. A private tutor? No, sir, she said softly. It was Arthur Donovan. He used to visit my father during his cleaning shifts. He offered to teach me programming as a hobby. Gary's eyebrows rose in genuine surprise. Arthur Donovan? Tall man, gray beard, always carries a stack of technical manuals. You know him? I do, but I had no idea he ever worked here. Gary nodded, a look of reverence in his eyes. Arthur designed nearly every core system this company runs on. He was our lead architect for 15 years. The foundation we're standing on. He built it. Lena felt a wave of realization wash over her. Never told me that, she whispered. That's Arthur for you. Gary smiled. Never one to boast. But that explains a lot about your report. You weren't guessing. You were applying knowledge from someone who built the system himself. Before she could respond, there was a knock on the door. Sir, his assistant said. Someone's here. He says it's about the Rodriguez investigation. He's very insistent. Send him in, Gary replied. The door opened, and standing there was none other than Arthur Donovan. He looked exactly as Lena remembered him. Weathered hands, kind eyes, and the quiet presence of a man who had once orchestrated the rhythm of an entire tech empire. Arthur. Gary stood up immediately. Good to see you, Gary. Arthur nodded. Then his gaze found Lena. Mija, as soon as I heard what happened, I came right away. Are you all right? Lena smiled, her voice thick with emotion. I'm okay. But why didn't you tell me you used to work here? She asked, her tone tinged with gentle reproach. Arthur took the seat beside her, his smile calm and steady. Because I wanted you to learn for the love of it, not because you thought it might land you a job. He turned to Gary. When Miguel called me this morning and told me what happened, I knew this young woman has more natural talent than most of the engineers I worked with throughout my entire career. Gary nodded, eyes glowing with conviction. Arthur, did you know she uncovered the security breach? I suspected she might, Arthur replied slowly, based on how she described the error patterns. But I didn't expect it to involve financial fraud. His face darkened. Hamilton was always ambitious, but I never thought he'd stoop this low. It's worse than we thought, Gary said grimly. Our preliminary investigation shows this isn't the first time he's used creative accounting. The irregularities go back nearly 2 years. How deep does it go? Arthur asked, his voice sharp now. We're still uncovering it, Gary replied. But one thing I know for sure. If Miss Rodriguez hadn't accepted Hamilton's dare, we might never have discovered any of this. He was getting bolder, more reckless, and he could have done far greater damage. Arthur looked at Lena with unmistakable pride. I always told you, the best programmers are the ones who notice what others overlook. Arthur. Gary hesitated for a moment before continuing. I have a proposal. We're going to need to rebuild trust and overhaul our security systems. The board has approved bringing in outside consultants for a full reconstruction. Arthur gave a soft laugh. I'm retired. Not for you, Gary said, then turned to Lena. For her, I want to offer Miss Rodriguez a full scholarship to complete her university degree, along with a paid internship in our security division. But she'll need a mentor, someone who understands both the technical and cultural foundations of what we're trying to rebuild. Lena's heart was pounding. Sir, I don't know what to say. Just say you'll think about it. Gary smiled, because by tomorrow morning, your story will be all over the local news. Janitor's daughter uncovers $1 million corporate fraud. And you've earned the right to choose your path. The only question left is, where do you want that path to lead? Lena looked between Gary, the man who gave her a chance, and Arthur, the mentor who prepared her to take it. She knew then that everything was about to change. 6 months later, Lena Rodriguez walked into the same corporate lobby where she once felt invisible. Now the security guard greeted her with a respectful nod. Employees who used to walk past without a glance now smiled and said, "Good morning." The badge around her neck read Systems Security Intern, a small title but one that carried both a promise and a responsibility. The local newspaper headline had been exactly as Gary predicted. Janitor's daughter exposes $1 million corporate fraud. It was picked up by regional outlets, then by national tech blogs. For 2 weeks, Lena couldn't walk to class without being recognized. The attention was overwhelming, but it opened doors she never knew existed. 3 top universities offered her full scholarships. 2 tech firms extended internship invitations. A national cybersecurity firm invited her to speak at their annual conference. But Lena chose to stay at Pinnacle Tech, working directly under Arthur while completing her associate degree through the company's education partnership program. "Morning, Lena," Sarah from IT called out as she passed by. The same woman who once barely acknowledged her, now regularly sought her input on security protocols. "Ready for the big presentation?" "As ready as I'll ever be," Lena smiled, though her stomach was a mess of nerves. Today marked the end of a 6-month journey, the official rollout of the new security infrastructure that began with her discovery. Her report would become a model for other companies on how to prevent similar breaches. But before that, she had something personal to take care of. She found her father in the break room, sipping coffee with Arthur, as they did nearly every morning now. Miguel looked up with that same proud smile he'd worn since the day her face appeared on the front page of the business section. "Mija," he said, rising to hug her. "How do you feel about today?" "Nervous," Lena admitted, "but the good kind of nervous." Arthur chuckled. "I remember my first board presentation. I was 37 and shaking like a leaf in the wind." "You did better than me," Lena teased, placing a warm hand on his shoulder. Over the past 6 months, the 3 of them had become an unexpected family. Arthur served as her official mentor, though in truth, he'd become something closer to a grandfather. Miguel had initially been worried about his daughter's sudden rise, but seeing her thrive had soothed those fears. "Have you made a decision about Stanford?" Arthur asked quietly. Lena sighed. The acceptance letter had arrived last week, a full scholarship to one of the most prestigious computer science programs in the country. It should have been an easy yes, but leaving Pinnacle Tech now felt like walking away from something meaningful. "I keep going back and forth," she said. "Part of me wants to go. It's Stanford. But the other part? The other part thinks there's still unfinished work here?" Miguel offered. "Work that matters," Lena nodded. Arthur nodded in understanding. "When I first started here 30 years ago, I thought perfect code and elegant systems were the most important things. It took me decades to realize what matters most is creating a place where people like you can thrive." Before Lena could respond, Gary appeared in the doorway. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, "but the board is ready for you." The presentation exceeded expectations. Lena walked the board through her investigation, the implemented security measures, and the internal cultural shifts designed to prevent future misconduct. When she finished, the room fell silent for a long, reflective moment. Then the board chair, a sharp-eyed older woman with silver hair, spoke up. "Mrs. Rodriguez, this is outstanding work, but I have to ask, what's your long-term plan? Will Pinnacle Tech be able to keep someone with your talent?" Gary leaned forward. "Actually, that's something we'd like to address today. Monsieur Lena Rodriguez, we'd like to offer you the position of Director of Systems Security, effective upon your graduation. It comes with a significant salary, full benefits, and the budget to build your own team." Lena felt her breath catch. "That's incredibly generous, but there's more," Gary added. "We're also launching the Donovan Rodriguez Security Initiative, a mentorship program designed to identify and nurture young talent from all backgrounds. You'll help run it." Arthur's eyes welled up. "Named after both of you," Gary said. "Arthur laid the foundation, and Lena showed us how to protect it." Lena looked around the room at the leaders who once didn't know her name, now offering her a future no one could have imagined. At Gary, the man who believed in her. At Arthur, who saw her potential before she believed in it herself. "What about Stanford?" she asked softly. "Stanford will always be there," Gary replied. "But opportunities to build something meaningful from the ground up, those are rare." 6 months ago, Lena Rodriguez was the janitor's daughter who did homework in empty conference rooms. Today, she was being asked to shape the future of corporate security. As she looked out the window at her father's old Honda parked between sleek executive cars, she understood. Some journeys aren't about leaving where you came from. Sometimes they're about transforming it. "I accept," she said, her voice clear and resolute. "All of it." And somewhere in the back of the room, Bryce Hamilton's replacement, a young manager hired for his collaborative leadership style, scribbled notes on what real leadership looks like. The transformation was complete. But for Lena, it was only just beginning.